Today is Thursday, April 29th, 2021, and it's approximately 7:30 a.m. And I would like to open the Concord Middle School Building Committee meeting today, and I'll take roll call. Is Stephen Crane with us?
Here.
Hi, Stephen. Jared Stanton?
Present.
Good morning. Matt Johnson?
Present.
Good morning, Matt. Lori Hunter?
Here.
And Lori. Justin Cameron?
Good morning.
Hi, good morning. John Harris?
Here.
Thank you, John. Russ Hughes?
Here.
Thank you, Russ. Kate Hanley?
Present.
Good morning, Kate. Peter
morning.
Vachelis?
Here.
Hi, Peter. Court Booth?
Present.
Hi, Court. Heather Bout?
Here, good morning.
Good morning. Frank Cannon?
Here.
Good morning, Frank. Chris Popoff?
Here. Good
Hi,
morning.
Chris. Charlie Parker? Not yet?
No, Charlie's here.
Present.
Oh, hey, Charlie. I couldn't see you. Matt Root?
Present. Hello, everyone.
Morning, Matt. And Pat Nelson?
Present. Good morning, all.
Good morning. And Don Guariello. Obviously, I'm here. So good morning, everyone. I want to open today's meeting by turning the floor over to Lori for a few words, if that's okay with everyone. Lori?
Thank you.
welcome.
So I'm grateful to get a minute just to open the meeting with a couple of thoughts. I've been pretty quiet as we've gotten to this next phase. I guess we could say, and struggled with some of the budget discussions and the space, gym and auditorium. I just felt maybe if I did a big picture, few thoughts, it might frame our discussion and our tone and maybe our path forward. And I'm so appreciative this project, especially under the conditions in which we are operating, could have fallen by the wayside, and this community has completely not done that. In fact, they've made it a priority. All of you, all the support we've had, everyone's engaged. At times that it's really hard to do that, and in different formats that we've had to kind of learn and recreate along the way. So I'm so extraordinarily grateful for that. I'm so grateful the ed plan, which it's a rich ed plan, and that's reflective of our schools, and that's been well supported. And I just have to say thank you for that too. I am a little worried though. Something different is happening as we've left that part of the project and turned to this next part. And I just wanted to sort of rewind time a little bit. I want to go back 2 years first. We're talking a lot about the 2019 town meeting. It's just important to me, and maybe this is my way of owning the responsibility of it. That discussion was a school committee superintendent bringing forward numbers as best as we possibly could in the context of what we had for information. Really challenging. You don't know the ed plan. You don't know a whole lot of things. You don't have professionals on board yet. Jared's able to speak to some of this later, but we were literally calling and borrowing favors to get professional input to do the best we possibly could, because we knew the town needed numbers to work off of, knowing we didn't know if those were perfect numbers. So all of that was within the context of what we could do best at the time. And it's what we could do best. And I've just been listening to a lot of conversations where sometimes I feel like it's like this third party was part of that. It was the Concord School Committee and the superintendent. I think too, a piece of that is remembering we hadn't done the ed plan. We didn't have all this. We didn't know we were going to come in as high as we did for square footage. We didn't realize the impact of having two schools consolidating into one. Sometimes I wish I've maybe been more vocal on the struggle we had to go from the initial 165,000 square feet to the 143 that exists now. We've made concessions and consolidated a lot, and there's some educators really struggling with the decisions we made to get that plan to where it is right now. I think the design subcommittee did a great job in responding to the gym and auditorium question that I feel like I want to name. That question has been out there since we started. Lorraine Finnegan looked at us in their interview with SMMA and said, that wish list is big and I don't know if you can afford it all. We tabled it when Hill was trying to get us to do vision work before SMMA was on the, we saw it right then and we said, well, we gotta put that aside. That's gonna be too hard. Auditorium and gym. Here we are exactly where it was predictable to land. I guess my last piece of thought is we have really in this community extraordinarily achieved collaborative relationships across all environments. The pandemic has brought that to this new level in a way that I could never have envisioned, and part of the success has been that collaboration. We've built really strong, and I think they mutually agree with this, rapport across the other town committees and departments. You know, the finance committee and Jared's, one of his favorite places to be is the finance committee. That is not where it was 4 years ago when I got here, and we respect each other. We disagree, but we collaborate and we get through. And I think that's mutual. Something different has been happening here the last few weeks. Committees are having discussions without everyone involved at the table. There's just a very different thing happening, and it's worrying me because I know what the history of the high school project did. It got divisive, it got toxic, it had a lot of long-lasting repercussions well past the building. And I just see red flags of that coming. We all want the same thing. There's so much collective energy to have a new school. I hope we can find a way to talk through the challenges we're at right now together. What a great place we're at. All we have left to figure out is auditorium and gym. But I hear how hard that is. You're all right. I have been really quiet because I can't figure out which way to go. The community wants bigger space to use. That's right. We want to be fiscally prudent. That's right. How do we get through this so there's a collaborative discussion happening and we can do that together? I'm grateful Dean was willing to come so we could have some dialogue and bridge that FinCom conversation. I know we can do this. I just know we can. So I'm hoping maybe we use that as the goal for this meeting. We've got decisions to make. We've set some parameters on the budget. I don't expect we're going to go all the way to 108. I don't know about everybody else, but I think we're going to come in somewhere that maybe we can get this done. So thank you for bearing with my thoughts, but it's been sort of churning for a while, and I just thought maybe this morning was the time to say it. Pat and Dawn, I'm grateful for the time.
Thank you, Lori. And I think you've said a lot of what many of us are feeling and thinking and waking up in the middle of the night worried about. So you're not alone in those thoughts. And I think we're all struggling to, find the right balance here. So with that, I know Pat had a couple of things she was hopeful to say. Pat, looks like you're moving around. Are you?
I am. I'm trying
you
to
in a
find my
place?
sweet spot with my internet. Yes,
right on top of the
everybody
router.
froze, and I thought this isn't good, but I think
Okay.
I'm in the best place I can be. The kitchen,
Excellent.
of course.
Mhm.
Yeah, Lori, thank you for your comments. And I want to sort of jump off of them to spend a few minutes just trying to get us focused on what our task is today, and hopefully to keep us focused on what our job is as the middle school building committee. So I'm just going to once again remind everybody that our charge is to build a middle school. Our charge is to conduct a feasibility study so that we can bring to the town a schematic design, a design for a middle school, and ask the town to vote for some amount of money to build that middle school. Our charge includes beginning schematics. We've been sort of stuck in our feasibility stage for a while, but it really is time for us to get to that schematics piece. And that schematics piece has required us to make some decisions. One of the things that's sort of gummed up a little bit, getting to that schematics piece, is another really important part of our charge, which was to listen to the community. And we have taken that so seriously. I have never seen so much communication coming from a large town project as our communications committee has done. So we've gotten a lot of communication. We're at the point where we need to get to schematics. And I think I said when we first started this process a few meetings ago that hearing from the community about what they want, hearing from other groups about what they want created sort of a messy process. And it does feel like it's sort of messy, not probably the most professional way to explain it, but things were a little bit messy. I don't feel like they're messy anymore. I feel like we've really gone through a process, which is what this committee had to do. So today we are going to look at what are the things that the community asks us to do? What are the things that we think we want to do within a budget that we set as a boundary, not to exceed 108 million. And so the last time we met, we said we're not going to go over 108 million, but that just gives us the opportunity to look at those things that were over and above 100 million for the base program. Now, since then, there's been some discussion of, well, what is the true cost of the base program? What role does escalation play in the base cost of the program? So one of the things we're going to do today is to hear from Dean Banfield from the Finance Committee, a different way of looking at the escalation, have some conversation with SMMA, because we need to know that we feel confident that the base program is going to cost us X. Then we can move on to what do we want to do about the gym and the auditorium, and how much above X do we want to spend for the gym and the auditorium. And that will be taking in the input that we've gotten from the community, which is large numbers of individuals, and from committees that are set up to represent the community. So the Finance Committee represents the community, and they've given us a very strong message. And so we need to listen to that and integrate that into this decision. But that's really, to me, it's a pretty simple equation now. We've set a boundary. We didn't have a budget before. We could have gone to 150 million. We didn't have a budget before. We now have set a boundary of 108 million, not going to go above that. We're going to talk a little bit about really validating what we think our base program is going to cost. And then we can go on to what do we want to do over and above that, given all the input that we've had. So that's how I'm seeing it. I am a co-chair, but I'm just one person. So I just wanted to put that out there, and if there's other ways to look at it, we're certainly wanting to listen to that. But it seems to me that it boils down to that simple decision, and that's the decision we have to make as a committee to move forward.
Great.
If I may, that's really what I was trying to get to in the last meeting, and you and Lori said it so much better that I deeply regret trying to say it myself. So thank you for really providing that clarification.
Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you, everyone, for, allowing Lori and Pat to share their thoughts. I certainly agree with what they've said, and reminded the school committee on Tuesday when we were invited to join their conversation and give an update that, up until last meeting on the 15th, we had, what we had in front of us was a 1.5 million to hire professionals, which we've done. Hill and SMMA have served us well to get us to this point where we always knew, and back to Lori and Pat's points about the community component to this, that this would be in some ways some of the hardest hurdles to overcome, in that you're never going to make everyone happy. And, I do this for a living. I make people happy and I make people sad. And sometimes it's just the delivery of the message. And, it's not an easy task for us, but we all agreed to participate in this committee. And I think that by doing so, we owe it to the community to do our best to try and serve the fiduciary obligations that we have, as well as the community obligations about listening to not only the educational piece of the building, but also the community asset that it could and should be, as far as everyone that pays taxes in Concord will have to participate in paying for this. So anyway, thank you for listening to some of the thoughts as we move forward with our discussion today. There's some sort of basic meeting notes and correspondence we want to get through before we hear from Dean. Yes, Court.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but I feel compelled to make a remark here. I'm a big fan of collaboration. I think we all are. But I think we need to recognize that we're a committee charged with trying to represent different stakeholder interests. And at the end of the day, get a school. So collaboration doesn't necessarily mean that we follow a single line of thought, but instead we look at various perspectives. I, for one, am not ready to agree with Lori that we're only here to look at gym and auditorium, for example. Maybe that's not the committee's will. Maybe we solve gym and auditorium by looking at other pieces of this project. So I appreciate the way she has framed it, but I don't want it said that her opinions necessarily speak for all of us. I think we have to work this through. That's what collaboration is.
I'm a little confused where we are in our agenda. I just look at the agenda. I don't know whether it's appropriate to be making remarks or discussing at this stage. It seems like we should follow our agenda.
Well, we certainly didn't.
I know. I just feel like perhaps we should.
Okay, so let's table this and get to where I was headed, which was approval of minutes. We've seen March 18th, April 8th, and April 15th from 2021. Does anyone have any edits or changes to those?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
The bottom of page 1, it just last paragraph, it says Pat Nelson noted that would like SMMA. I assume that's she.
Which, Matt, just for reference, which meeting are you on?
That's the March 18th.
Thank you.
And then I have some for April 8th and April 29th, but let's stick with, I guess, March 18th for now.
Does anyone have any other comments or changes to the 18th, March 18th meeting minutes? Okay, how about, let's get through all the changes and then we'll vote on them.
Sure.
Then, thank you. Then
Oh,
next-
also, excuse me, also on March 18th, it talks about at the last page, Tracy Morano, 39 Cartridge Lane. I believe that's Partridge Lane.
Partridge with a P, thank you.
That's also in one of the other, in the April 8th minutes, the same person, same address mistake.
Thank you, Matt. Anyone else have either March 18th or April 8th changes?
Yeah, also on April 8th, there was this comment at the top of page 2 about the select board feedback, and that Pat Nelson noted during the select board meeting, they were concerned with cost and impact on citizens' taxes, but also if the community needs a larger gym or auditorium, it should be invested now. But I had pointed out that that last comment was made by a member of the public, not by the select board members. So I don't know if that clarification should be added or that just that item should be struck.
Okay. Let's strike it from that and follow up with a community member added that it should be invested now under public
Okay.
comment.
And then I believe it's page 4. There's the middle of the page. It says Matt expressed concern about net zero ready and the special requirements, capabilities, and quality of results. I just think it should be added if using the DBB approach.
Thank you. Yeah, that's true. That's still on the 18th, right?
That's,
I'm sorry, on
that's April 8th.
April 8th.
Yeah.
Thank you, Matt.
Okay.
Any other changes to those from anyone?
I had one for April 15th.
Okay, sounds like we're ready to move on to that. Please, Matt.
So that is page 2, the second paragraph, Todd Benjamin. At the end, I think we should add that he also expressed concern about holding CMSBC meetings during working hours.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, we haven't necessarily raised that, but that's a good point on the meeting minutes, though. I do remember him saying that and appreciate the feedback. Anyone else have changes to 15? Hi,
Yes,
Court.
please.
Yep.
Yeah, I'd like the April 15th minutes to see a little bit more work. I think that where were we here? I think that on public comment, it was notable that the public comment did receive exchanges. Normally, there aren't exchanges with public comment. I think those should be added. And on the votes, this being an official record, I think that the various motions leading up to the final motions should be part of the narrative. I'd request that before I'm able to support these, please.
Okay. And that's specific to the 15th Court.
That's correct, yes.
Okay,
Thank
Yep.
you.
thank you. Anyone else? Okay, so with that, why don't we vote to well, I didn't entertain a motion on the March 18th and April 8th minutes, seeing that there's a request to add additional information from the April 15th.
So move to approve the minutes of March 18th and April 8th as amended.
Thank you, Matt.
Happy to second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Stephen Crane,
Yes.
Jared,
Yes.
Matt Johnson,
Aye.
Lori Hunter. Lori's
Sorry, I was
muted.
muted. Yes.
Nope, that's okay. Justin,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Russ,
Yes.
Kate,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Court,
Yes.
Heather,
Yes.
Frank,
Yeah.
Chris,
Yes.
Charlie,
Yes.
Matt Root,
Yes.
Pat,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. Okay, so moving on to correspondence. Heather, what do we have?
Oops, sorry, there we go. I had to unmute.
I didn't mean to
Okay.
catch you off guard.
No, I was ready. I just realized I had muted again. Let's see. Correspondence is, I can be pretty brief today. We had 11 emails that were directly to us, 17 total, but 6 of them were basically kind of follow up to one that where people were copying us on the whole response. So 6 of them were part of a conversation. Of the 11 that were addressed to us, let's see, 5 were supporting the idea of a larger gym and auditorium. 1 was specifically about a larger gym and support for that. 1 was clarification on our gym discussions. That was from the head of the CCYB. So clarification on our spec discussions during the last meeting. 3 were about the concept of keeping the budget lower and making difficult choices and asking us to make sure we're being thoughtful on that. 1 was just a question on our designer firms, and 1 was the one that you mentioned. We will discuss the letter from the finance committee, and I'll let you go through that.
Great. So anyone have any questions or comments on correspondence? Okay. So with that, we'll move on to the Finance Committee meeting discussion. Just to let everyone know, it was last Thursday, right? That feels like a couple weeks ago. A week ago today, we were invited to listen to the Finance Committee's conversation regarding the middle school with an update from our liaison, Dean Banfield, which he will walk us through what he said to them last week. And they had discussion, probably 2 hours, 15 minutes worth of discussion. We were just in the audience and listening, but they had a informational conversation regarding the project, and coming out of that was the letter that I believe everyone should have received. We forwarded along to the entire committee. I'm happy to read through that just for the record, for those on the line from the public who maybe aren't privy to this letter, and then turn it over to Dean to talk us through what he presented and then have discussion regarding that. So why don't I go ahead and do that? So on April 25th, to the members of the Middle School Building Committee, and copied on this is the Select Board regarding the Concord Middle School building budget. The letter reads, the Finance Committee urges the Middle School Building Committee to revisit the vote for 108 not to exceed in quotes budget. We believe the rationale relied upon for that vote was inaccurate, making the portion of the incremental 8 million attributable to cost escalation unnecessary. Per SMMA, the current 99.2 million cost estimate assumes going out to bid in June of 2023 and comfortably includes escalation costs through that date. We're happy to share our calculations with you. To the extent that any portion of the incremental 8 million is attributable to design features beyond the approved scope of 143,000 square feet, we ask you to consider reallocating space from currently planned usage. At 100 million, the new middle school will be the largest capital project the town has undertaken. It results in a significant increase to our property tax and delays other pressing municipal capital projects. The average household will see an increase of over $1,000 per year for at least 20 years. We are concerned that increasing the middle school budget above 100 million only exacerbates an increase that for some citizens already poses an unsustainable burden. We are recommending to the Select Board that they actively pursue other sources of funding which would mitigate this burden, and hope you encourage these efforts. The Finance Committee is fully committed to the construction of a new middle school, and we recognize the tremendous effect you are all making. Our call for budget constraint is in no way diminishes our gratitude to you, our committee members, to the school administration, and to our teachers. We look forward to opening day of a beautiful new middle school we can all feel good about. Sincerely, Mary Hartman, Chair of the Concord Finance Committee. So with that, Dean, I would love to hand you the floor and have you talk us through your short presentation that was given to the Finance Committee, and then we can have conversation regarding this.
Thank you, Dawn.
Excellent.
So I'm going to need to be allowed to share my screen. So if that could be enabled, that would be good.
You think
Should
that's
be all
Lori?
set, Dean. Yeah, give it a try.
Okay, fine. I'll just introduce myself quickly. I'm Dean Banfield. I am the liaison member from the Finance Committee, and I live at 73 Walden Terrace. Because I'm not a member of your committee, I'm going to do the full introduction. There you go. So I'm going to share a screen here. Put that out there, and we'll put that slideshow mode. So is that everybody in full screen mode there? Before I get started with this, I just want to kind of go back through how I arrived at the slides we're going to go through. Somewhere around 6 weeks ago or so, the committee was already engaged in the ideas that were coming in from the community regarding a larger space for auditorium and a larger space for the gymnasium. And, ideas were percolating about the budget and possibly could we go higher. And so I set myself to independently sort of think about that. Like, how can we figure this out? Can we get a thought that gets us to a higher budget? And somewhere around 6 weeks ago, I sent my chair, Mary Hartman, a letter, and it was pretty simple. I said, okay, well, you know what? pandemic has created a delay. The committee didn't meet for like 6 or 7 months, and they've had to revisit a lot of the stuff that they've been working on. So there's at least a year in here where we've lost time. So let's just apply an 8% lift to whatever we're working with. And that got us to like 97.5, just off the raw number that the town meeting had looked at. So I'm like, okay, well, that seems like it's a reasonable way to approach this. And lo and behold, in the Q&A memo that was circulated to this committee, it also came to the select board and the finance committee. That's exactly the logic. Well, we've lost time. The building's not going to be built till June of 23. So let's take our $90 million number. And at the low end, which was 90 million, it goes up to almost 97.5, 98 in that memo. But at the high end, where we were working with $100 million cap or $100 million upper boundary that was part of the charge of the hill, that would go up 8% also. That would go up to 108. So that's kind of where that memo came out. It's the same logic. I was like, okay, but by the time that memo came out, my thoughts and my ideas about how this has been escalated had really changed. So let's go back through where we started, which is back at town meeting, and we're going to start with some basic terms. So the basic terms are, what's the unit cost? This committee is well familiar with all these three terms: unit cost, scope, and escalation. Unit costs, we've worked a lot with the number 555 at this committee. And that number, when you escalate it to add fully loaded soft costs, ends up being $694. For purposes of comparison, in this presentation, I'm going to use $694 because back at town meeting, we were using a fully loaded number. And so I just to keep apples comparing with apples, I'm using the fully loaded number through this presentation. We all know what the scope is. It's basically the size. We're just measuring how many square feet we're trying to build in gross square feet. And what's escalation? What does it mean? It basically means if you're going to build something today, it's going to cost X. But if you're trying to plan for something that's going to be built tomorrow or 2 years from now, it's going to cost X plus inflation. So if you have a 10% annual inflation, a $500 a square foot building would cost $550, but you get the same building a year from now. It's just the same building, but you have to build in inflation. So that's what escalation is all about. So we're trying to see, how has escalation impacted us since we were way back at town meeting? So that's what we're going to look at. So the town meeting representation was this. It was a scope size of the building at 125,000 square feet. And the unit cost was, Jared called around, he talked to OPMs, he talked to various people, and found that to build the building then would cost $648 a square foot. And we applied a reasonable escalation, 2 years of escalation, because it would take us 2 years to get there. We thought that we would be able to get to construction bids by December of this year. Well, we lost a lot of time, so that's not even in the game anymore. But let's go back for 1 minute if we could. So we applied escalation to get us to 90 million plus. It was, if you run the numbers, it's like 91.5 or something like that. But let's just look at one thing before I leave this slide behind. 125,000 square feet. And what does that number mean? That number came from far away, and it came from a Feingold Alexander report. And what they did was they took a base MSBA allocation that everybody who participates in the MSBA is allocated, 115,000 square feet. And they added room for an auditorium because they knew Concord would want a nice auditorium. They knew Concord would want a nice gymnasium. So they added 10,000 square feet to be divided between those two spaces because they saw that the community had already committed spaces in Sanborn that, that represented the community's interests in the arts and in larger gymnasium space. So they saw these things and they said, option 3A in the Feingold report was 115,000 square feet, didn't include those. It was a default MSBA building. Option 3B was 125,000 square feet, and it included these spaces. So most communities can kind of get by. They can build a building at the MSBA rubric, and they get a building that they can teach in and kids can learn in. And it's not, it's not a crude, cinder block building. These are decent buildings. You see them at Gates Middle School. They're using the MSBA and they're getting good results. So that was where that number came from. 648 was done very, very well. So this came out at 90 million bucks. And in those slides, we were also told, please vote for this now. If you don't vote for this now and we go back to the MSBA and we fail to get into the program and we have to come back next year, there's going to be another 8% added to between 2.7 and 8.3% added to this. And we'll have to come back again and we'll just lose time and it'll cost us money. So escalation was represented in those slides as kind of a threat. If we didn't vote and we didn't get our MSBA entrance, we'd be back here and it would escalate, cost us more. So here we are. Okay, here's where we are today. If we were to build that default MSBA building, but add our Concord spaces, our nice gym, and an auditorium that seats 350 kids, the unit cost is $694. That is $555, which Hill and SMMA have agreed is what we think it's going to cost when we get to June of 23 and we go out to bid. The current estimate is $694 per square foot. So we don't have to escalate anymore. That is the estimate. That's what we're estimating. If we built this building, it would cost us $86.7 million to build. Okay, so it's way below even the 90 plus that we thought we would need to build it when going out to bid at December of this year. So there really hasn't been much escalation. Escalation has not materialized as we anticipated it would at town meeting. So it's well down, it's up 1.97% per year. So let's look at where we are today. The current status, excuse me, the current status is that we have spec'd out a building that doesn't quite get us to the gymnasium or the auditorium that the Feingold report had originally included in the 125. But we've added these spaces to the ed plan, and we're now at 143, 694 per square foot. We're at 99.2. The current plan, just so we're clear, the current plan is not explained by cost escalation. It is because of expanded interest in various programming needs. So, that's just the way it is. The scope changes have created the budget pressure. It is not created by escalation. So this puts to rest the first paragraph of that Q&A document that was circulated and was part of the conversation from the last meeting, which is, oh, we can just add money because we kind of overlooked the fact that we've lost time, so let's add escalation money. This is the program that we are currently at, and it's caused by increasing the scope of what we had proposed at town meeting and not by escalation. Escalation simply has not materialized. It's materialized below, even well below what we thought it would at town meeting. So that's really the message. And here are the three things side by side. And that's I don't have that much more to add to that. It's a conversation that this committee needs to engage in, which is, we represented something because we needed to put something on paper. We needed to throw something at the wall so that the town could debate it, could decide. And what we put on paper would only cost us $86.7 million to build today. And that's going out to bid in June of 23. So we've expanded the ideas about what we need. And now now the things that were actually included in that conversation at town meeting are pushing us beyond that. So we need to just be cognizant of that. That's the only message I'm trying to say here. We need to be cognizant that it is not escalation that has caused us to be trying to push up beyond 100 million at this point. It's because the program that we're working with is pushing us there. So that's the only thing I have to say. It's a pretty simple message. It's not because of inflation. Inflation is in construction costs appears to be fairly modest, and it hasn't caused us anywhere near what we had thought it might. If there's any questions, I'll take them, but that's my message.
Thank you, Dean. Would you mind stopping sharing? If we need to come back to your slides, that'd be great. But that way I can, thank you, see the gallery of members. Questions, comments, hands, feedback? I see multiple. Frank Cannon?
Yeah.
Yes.
I still am with people that are in the trades. And I got a call 2 weeks ago that steel had risen 100%. Have you had anything on that?
Well, let me be very clear. I'm not a professional in this business, but you have hired professionals that I hope you can trust in Hill and SMMA. And they're currently estimating that this building will come in at $555 per square foot construction costs. So I understand there's a lot of this anecdotal information about specific materials have been escalating rapidly or excessively. But Hill is keeping they're sharpening their pencil all the time on this, and I'm sure SMMA is as well. I'm not a professional in this field, and they've sort of stuck with that number since February.
Can I offer one quick clarification on that just before we
Sure,
do?
Kristen.
I just want to clarify that the 555 is a target that we have been recording. Our current estimate is on all of our slides and on the spreadsheets that we've been circulating. It is 559 right now a square foot. And we understand that we've been working toward that target, but I just want to clarify because that doesn't align with our backup. It's still within that 100 million, but it's just that $4 a square foot difference.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kristen. Jared, I think I saw your hand up.
Thank you. So yeah, I just want to clarify just a couple things because a lot of these are in fact my numbers. And I just want to take everyone back a little bit to when we really first started talking about costs and this building project. And I believe it was around, the exact date was January 22nd, 2019. That was the first presentation that we brought to the school committee. One of the things that I just want to point out sort of as fact, the cost escalation 6.93 number, that came from MSBA directly from 2010. And some of these things that I am repeating that was told, but already, but between 2010 and 2016, that was the price escalation. How I arrived at those numbers, and I'll be the first to say I am not an expert at all in predicting the cost of square footage at building projects, etc. I called a number of OPMs at the time. I called a number of architects. And in fact, at the time, they said that 6.93 in today's dollars back in 2019 is probably low. And I did state that on that date, that 6.93 could in fact be a low number. Right now, to say the cost escalations are not, I'm not saying that they're that high, but to say that they're low and lower than we projected, we don't know. Mr. Cannon just talked about the price of steel. The price of wood, I'm hearing, is skyrocketed. I don't know if we have that in our escalations yet, etc. So that's one of the things that we mentioned. We also said that, $90 million, that was the number that all of our numbers were based off. So that number is almost 2.5 years old, that we did in fact come out and say that, we're basing these numbers off of 90 million. I also put together the RFP for the OPMs as well as the designer or the OPM. And the reason we never said that we were going to have a budget of 80 to 100 million. We said that we needed to put that in the RFP so we can get people and companies, construction the OPM firms to bid on the feasibility, etc. So you need to put the 80 to 100 million in there. And that is what the building committee did decide at the time, that is the range that at the time that we were estimating, but no way was that the budget amount. So I just feel like I need to just clarify some things and where those numbers came from, and in fact, how old they are. The other one that I just want to point out as well is we were talking about a $548,000 redundancy right now in having 2 schools back in, again, 2019. Not all of that is general fund money. Some of that may include additional food service workers, etc. So that's not just going to be able to come off the general fund amount when we open this building. And lastly, the other thing I just want to point out is other revenue sources, such as, building rentals, et cetera, on this to offset the contract, the total costs. I don't know how necessarily feasible that is to lower taxes by doing that. Certainly would love to find out if there's a mechanism to do that. But I don't anticipate the building rentals to be significant amount to make a huge dent every single year on that. But we do not make a profit on building rentals. So we would have to increase those costs because we just want to pay the electrical and our custodial staff. And then my last point is, and I think you all know this, that the debt for a couple of our elementary schools will be coming off the books in the next couple of years. I believe Willard is, or Alcott is 2025 and Willard is soon after. So I don't know if those numbers are being factored in on the large increase that we are talking about the taxes. So I just wanted to clarify that. I hope I made some sense there, and thank you.
Thank you, Jared. I appreciate that. Lorraine, is that your hand? I see. There's like a few different ways. I can see visual, and then Jared's was like in his photo and yours was on the panel. So please.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Just wondering, so I know there's a lot of talk about escalation, and Dawn, I just sent you 2 emails. Just the cost of steel has risen astronomically, almost 200% in some categories for some shapes since February of this year. So I would say that escalation and estimating is like playing the stock market. Sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. It all depends on factors. When the gypsum drywall plant burnt down in Tennessee, I think it was, back in 2008, the cost of drywall went through the roof. For the projects that we were bidding at that time, we had not factored that into our pricing. So they got hit hard. When the factory was rebuilt and rebounded, they had a surplus because people had tried to come up with other ways. And all of a sudden the price of gypsum dropped. Right now, the price of lumber is 3 times what we paid for it this time last year. Because last year, everybody decided to do home improvement projects when they were locked home for the year. And you can buy a 2x4 at Home Depot for $270. Now you pay $11.50 for that same 2x4. So we are factoring in some of those numbers when we factor escalation, but we're not factoring the roller coasters. It's not taking into consideration the roller coasters. So when we go to bid, we don't know where on that spectrum we're going to be. Some of the numbers that we've escalated will be lower, some of the numbers will be higher. Right now, escalation looking forward is 6 to 9% and rising. I'm not sure where the 1.5 or 1.7 was, but it is not in that range currently. For those of us who were lucky enough to bid our jobs in the last 3 months, it was before the steel price went up. I can tell you right now, getting shop drawings, they're trying to substitute shapes left, right, and center on me because when they put in their price, they hadn't bought their raw material. And now that they're trying to buy their raw material, they're realizing that the price they submitted on bid day, which they're locked into, is not what they're going to be paying. So Dawn, I think the 3 images I just sent you on the different shapes would be good to share with the committee. And in addition to that, things impact our construction costs that we don't always think about. So taping compound for drywall has a component, a material in it called latex. There is an industry shortage on latex because of gloves that were made during the pandemic. So the cost of taping compound and tape for drywall has gone through the roof. Not only has it gone through the roof, but you can't get it. So we have people on our project saying, is there something else? Are we willing to do the snapboard walls that have a beautiful, and I'm being facetious because there's nothing beautiful about it, plastic trim between them to avoid taping joints? So we're reacting to the market, but we are only reacting to the market. We do not control the market. We need to protect your budget. We need to protect the project. So the escalation that we're going to put into the estimates is based on the current information at the time of estimate. And at the time of estimate, we were in the low end of these numbers, not where they are today. If you look at the calendar on the bottom of that screen. So you can see, and that's plate steel. 1/4" 5/16 3/8" plate has jumped from $700 a square foot to $1,300 right now. Do we think it'll come down? Yes, that's what happens. Right now we have issues with, most of our steel comes from Canada. They can't come across the border. There's a limitation on truck drivers. A lot of people are not trucking at this time. So that's increasing our delivery charges, and it's increasing their production charges as well. All of these plants have labor shortages at the moment, also driving up the cost. And there's not a lot of scrap steel. The cost of scrap steel has gone up because of imports and lack of imports. So these are just some of the things that we watch, and this is part of our job, and it comes out through the industry. But if you look at when the last estimate was done, it didn't take into account these spikes. So we're hoping it will go down, but escalation needs to be really something that's considered based on what our professional estimators provide, because they have this information daily. So I just wanted to clarify that on why prices are changing.
Thank you, Lorraine. And I think everyone would have seen the graphs I pulled up that you just shared, and those were wide flange tube steel and plate steel. So yeah, I mean, it's a crystal ball none of us have. I think we've all said that multiple times. And thank you for that. Did I see any other hands? I see Matt Johnson. Oh, hold on. Okay, I'm gonna go Matt, Charlie. I see Mary. Mary, I'm gonna hold you till after the committee members, if that's okay, and I'll allow you to participate. Thank you. Okay, Matt Johnson.
Yeah, I think the dean's point, though, was that the new not to exceed amount was based upon extrapolation of escalation estimates in current bid quantities that we're going to then justify an increase in scope. And I think that if we now anticipate with these spikes and with inflation, that in fact that the cost of per square foot is going to go up, this isn't really the time to be increasing scope of the building. That we're really using this past estimate of escalation, I believe applying too many years of escalation to assume that, well, we've got 108 to work with instead of maybe 100 from what the town meeting said. But in fact, I think that we should be even more conservative, considering that we have these spikes and that we may face future escalation, and this isn't, that any changes in scope that we make now will be amplified if there is future inflation or escalation that occurs from here that we aren't anticipating.
Thank you, Matt. Charlie, did I see your hand? I think I
yes,
said I'd go to you next.
It seems that the 555 number, although we recently had that presented to us in a great deal of detail, is now obsolete. I think that's what I'm hearing, is that, steel is way up, 2x4s, 5 times what they used to cost, and so forth and so on, that we're totally out of the box in terms of the original estimate. I pushed hard on that. I think many of us did. We said, is it an all-in number? Have you accounted properly for the inflation and for the increasing cost of materials? What about escalation? You seem to be at the low end. What is up with that? And I think we pressed and pressed and pressed on that. And the answer was, we are very, very confident in our 555 number. So to hear now that there is indeed some inflation that we somehow didn't account for would suggest to me that we kind of missed on this and shouldn't have been so rosy with our low estimate. And I guess I would come back to Matt's comment that does this open the project to a rethink? We're 25% above MSBA in terms of the space that we're allocating to this building. 25%. Other communities do build buildings that are MSBA buildings. I know that's been poo-pooed in the past by some, but it is true that many communities do build MSBA buildings, and they're successful in teaching in those buildings. I'm not suggesting that we do that in this case, but I am suggesting that if we're high on on space. And we've missed on the estimate, the 555, that we may want to do some reconsideration on what we're doing overall with some of these large spaces that we've allocated. So it would seem to me that you know, what I'm hearing are some fairly significant you know, danger signals here.
I guess I would like to say that as someone who does many MSBA projects, and I have recently been on the phone with them and heard straight out of their mouth that no one is ever right at their space template, I think is a fair statement to say. So yes, people do build MSBA projects, but almost zero are right at their space template recommendation. They're guidelines for a reason. So I just want to be clear on that, because I wish I had had that meeting recently recorded. But anyway, that's to the
Can I just
MSBA
clarify?
point. Yeah.
Can I clarify my statement? So I was not trying to say that the numbers were incorrect. Charlie, what I'm trying to respond to was the 1.9% this past year. Our estimators carried what they saw as the increase in the construction industry. We may not have seen as much of the steel or included as much of the steel as we've seen, but I do recall significant conversations about why our costs were so high, as well as why our escalation number was so high. And it's because our estimating professionals were seeing the spike in the market. So I'm not saying that the number we have, the 559, is not the right number. That's not what I'm saying at all. Some prices go up, some prices go down. I was reacting to the reference of the 1.97% over the last year, which is not what the industry has seen. I just want to be clear on that.
Thank you, Lorraine. Ian, do you have anything to say on that? I want to give, you're muted, but I wanted to give you an opportunity as well.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, just to clarify escalation and what we've carried in the current estimate. So from essentially Q1 of this year through Q1 of 2023, we've carried an 8% escalation, which is 4% per year. So 4% is what we're carrying for escalation per year in the current estimate. And if you look at the schedule, you know, we kind of have bid time as Q1 of 2023. If it bumps to Q2, then we would project a 9% escalation. So, but basically 1% per quarter. And that's what's currently being carried in the estimates.
Thank you, Ian. So just for some perspective, I think it's obvious why I don't do estimating. It is not a linear process, and there are so many unknowns that they do their best based on, you know, information that's current and projections that are, you know, seen and some unforeseen. It's not a science, it's an art in that they cannot predict the future. None of us can. So I think we all need to be comfortable, which is how we got, you know, back to our last meeting and the, you know, the idea that town meeting looked at a loose number in that it was really clear 90-ish million, right? There will be escalation because that is literally how things work. No one knows, you know, a range was put out there. And then recognizing that, you know, as years go on, there could be an increase. So I think we were trying to frame the conversation around none of us have that crystal ball. We did say it could be in this range. We're here to study it. And that's where we are. We've gone through the motions of getting an ed plan, you know, designing the space to it, right sizing it. And to Lori's point earlier, there were a lot of concessions on the educators and to get there. And then as part of that community feedback and then additional community feedback, once we put what we believed was the space to fit the educational plan out there. So in the context of that, we set a budget number because none of us know. I'm not, you know, none of us know what it's really going to cost until we go out to bid. So the next step in this process is you study something is to actually design it. Let's not forget, this is like, you know, something on a piece of paper to get us to this point to understand the space of the building, but we need to actually figure out what's it going to look like? What, you know, what are the materials? What are the space, like in the context of the size, what is this building? What are the site, parameters in that, it came up at school committee the other day. What's going to happen with the cross-country path? Is that part of this or not? We don't know yet because we're carrying a budget for the site. So our next step is to really figure this building out and design it and get another round of real estimating to understand in the time from last year to this, it'll be a year and a half since we've had a professional estimate and, putting a real number to that. I see lots of hands. Pat, and then Mary and Dean are both in the queue, I promise.
Lorraine and Kristen, I just want to, and Ian, I guess I just need to clarify for myself that there's a lot of uncertainty, as Dawn has said. The escalation that we're carrying is not a liberal, or it's not a skinny escalation. It's a reasonable, in your opinion, your professional opinion, it's a reasonable escalation for the cost of the school. So that while there's a lot of uncertainty, we could assume from the professionals who are working for us that the base program is going to be around 100 million. Is that a fair statement? Am I?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, estimators are very tied to the material market. That's what they do. They monitor the bids that come in. They look at the prices. They talk to the suppliers. They're part of that supply chain email that I just shared with Dawn that showed what the charts are. So when we had our estimating and we were going through the numbers and there was, a lot of discourse over, is that the right number? It's because they're coming at it with what they see in the future. So, this is their profession. As I said, it's a roller coaster. Sometimes numbers are up, other numbers are down. Masonry could be down compared to what we had predicted, but steel could be up. So everything, the goal is that you balance out at what you estimate. The goal is that you do better than that and you hit the market when it's on the down. But everyone right now, lumber prices for the end of this year are predicted to return close to what they were before the pandemic. So, we're not bidding this year. So I think that's something we'll be hitting down on the market when the lumber comes back. That is the current prediction in the industry.
So we could basically, could we consider just putting to bed the question about escalation, that we've got a base building for the 143,000 square feet that is today, with the information we know, going to cost us $100 million. And then it'll be up to the committee to decide what more or what else we want to do with that. But that we can not, I'm not discounting the all of the work people have done trying to figure out the escalation. I just don't know how long we need to work on teasing that out. But that's just my thought.
Excuse me, just to put Lorraine's conversation into an example, about 3 to 4 months ago, we were having our projects coming in about 5% under. We haven't had one bid in a while, although I'm on a building committee in Arlington where we just bid a job. And it had professional estimators. It had about a 2-year history of back and forth. That job bid and came in 15% over, and it was based 100% on the most recent spike in building costs. They did an entire analysis on it, and they found out that the costs throughout the materials, particularly steel and lumber and PVC, had averaged over the project about 30 to 35%, completely unheard of in the 30, 40 years I've been involved in this for any sort of spike. So I just want to give those two examples that I think we've done a really good job on a longer term basis to come up with the percentages we have and continue to be comfortable with them. But like Lorraine said, you never know where you're going to be in the roller coaster. Thanks.
Thanks, Peter. Hi, Mary. Would you introduce yourself? I think everyone knows who you are, but
I think they do. Hi, I'm Mary Hartman. I live at 16 Concord Green. I'm the chair of the FinCom, and I am the author of the letter that we're talking about now. And I wanted to talk about what precipitated the letter. Several things did. One was, it's really good to see now that the FinCom, our FinCom liaison has an active voice in your conversations, because up until now, we've been silent. So I'm encouraged to see that now Dean is an active part and is being listened to and given time on your agenda. So that's wonderful. I think what we wanted to do with the letter is separate out things that this committee can control and things that this committee can't control. So it seemed to me that the escalation is something that we really can't control. That's about, outside of your control. But I think that other things like scope changes are things that this committee can control. And we just wanted to differentiate that. But the most important part of that letter, I thought, was the paragraph that talked about the burden on the taxpayers. And I just want to caution you that I know you've gotten a lot of input from some community members, but the sentiment that we express in that letter, I think, is broad and deep within the community. And these people don't send letters and they're not well organized. But I think it's a voice that you really want to consider when you're making your deliberations. And you also might want to get more input from other boards within town that have a broad perspective on the entire committee. And with that, I'll say thank you for your time and thank you for the work you do.
thank you, Mary. I appreciate your comments. And just so everyone's clear, Dean, you can always have a voice in our committee. I know that you're often in the audience with your camera off, but I welcome you to participate at any time. Open invitation.
Thank you.
With that, I see your hand, so
It is up.
I meant to
Yes,
call
it is.
you.
It's up. Thanks. Couple points. As an observer, I'm happy to, as they say, speak when spoken to. So I'm going to not attempt to become a sort of pseudo member, but in the event that you want to ask me a question, and as a liaison, I also have to, you have to understand that I cannot really represent, so to speak, the FinCom. I'm just a voice. And so any comments I make would have to be just comments in that regard.
I understand. Thank
but
you.
I do want to respond to one thing that Lorraine was very concerned about, and that is that on one of the slides, it indicated a 1.97% increase of escalation per year. And that escalation per year is imputed over a 3.5-year window. In 2019, a dollars per square foot number for constructing a building was presented at town meeting of $648. And we are currently expecting that it will take us $694 per square foot to build a building bid out in June of 23. So the difference between those two interval is 3.5 years. The amount of actual escalation is only like $46. So that is a very low imputed percentage increase over that long window, 3.5 years, 1.97%. And as Peter just said, in the last year, there had been jobs that were coming in 5% below expectation. That we really didn't see any escalation. They were coming in low. So this is over a long window, and right now we might be in a very steep curve. And some of the little charts that you just showed also showed that severe dip in materials costs, excuse me, from 2019 through a big trough. And now, yes, we do have an uptick. So, over the 3.5-year window, yeah, that's 1.97. It's like 2-ish% over that window. It's not just this year or just from now until 2023. It is over the full scope of when we were at town meeting to when we're actually going to build the building. So that's my only comment about that.
Thank you, Dean. Any other questions, comments? I think I got through the hands that were visible.
I just wanted to have one more comment, which was about that FAQ that was quoted from in our last meeting. So, you know, the FAQ not only had that section about escalation, but it addressed 3 other topics. And one of them was the incremental cost per $1 million to the taxpayer. And that number, it turns out, was understated by over 30%. So when, you know, we were discussing, and Stephen mentioned that for the average taxpayer, reducing the, you know, not to exceed amount from 110 to 108 would save a taxpayer, you know, average taxpayer $17. The number actually would have been $24 if it had been correctly calculated. So that the finance director has subsequently, you know, corrected that. I don't think that a new document has been issued, but just to state that, you know, the numbers we were working with last time about how much any incremental scope would cost, we're understating, severely understating what the cost of the taxpayers would likely be.
Thank you for pointing that out, Matt. And I don't know that I was aware of that since I wasn't able to participate or listen in on the, you're talking about the select board meeting. Is that correct? The most recent?
No, this is the most recent middle school building committee meeting where Peter Fischelis initially raised 110 million, then we dropped it back to 108. Stephen made a comment based upon the FAQ, which was the numbers we had at the time, you know, that for the average taxpayer, that would be, you know, $850 per million, it would be $17 to reduce it. I'm just saying that that's an example of the kinds of calculations were made in the last meeting here that really didn't reflect the actual incremental costs because of an error in the FAQ.
Yes, sorry. I understood that the FAQ was part of our conversation. I didn't realize that there had been pointed out that there was an error. So I will ask that that be revised and updated with the correct information. So thank you for pointing that out. I haven't seen anything updated on that. So we will get that out to everyone. And thank you for pointing that out. And I wanted to ask one more question real quick. I see Court has his hand up. 1 second, Court. I promise I'll get to you. Matt, is your hand in the thing? Is that your previous?
That's an old hand. Let me
okay.
put it down.
Just checking. I wanted to get a queue of hands. Sorry. Okay. Thank you for taking that down. One quick thing. We've talked mostly about the escalation piece of the letter, but we haven't talked about the other spaces. And I guess I wanted to put that on Lori's plate as far as asking where, you know, as far as the ed plan and the spaces that have been approved and that have formally gone through school committee, designer subcommittee, this committee. I didn't want to lose sight of that request.
So we're certainly willing, if that's a request of the committee, we will go back to that and see what if there's anything there.
Okay. So kind of a, Pat, sorry.
I was just going to say, Lori, I think that, you know, the growth of the ed plan space from that 2017 127 to where we are now, it might be worthwhile to just say a few words about why that is for the committee, just to remind us, and we've talked a lot about the vision of the ed plan and the value of the ed plan, but maybe just a few minutes to just to say a few words about that, because I think we will be discussing that going forward today.
Yeah, sure, and real high level, because I know you've heard it, but you know, the team model and really working with the you know, ability to split kids into teams that are supported by a group of teachers across curricular areas and that they have a common space in the building. So it's kind of a school within a school, at least for that portion of the day. All of the music and art programs and the depth of those and making sure space is adequate. World language is a great example of another space driver because it's something our kids are essentially in core, almost a core content area for us as a fifth subject. Special ed, I think, is another driver that maybe we haven't talked enough about. The 3 intensive programs that we're building, are, you know, substantially separate and kids are in there whatever portion of the day they need to be. Those have all dedicated spaces that are not necessarily in other schools. And then the flexible space, which I think is what Charlie was referencing earlier, maker space, the alternate gym space, and the library being options where kids can go at portions of the day for the purposes those rooms serve. So, so I think that's the highlights. And definitely the consolidation of 2 schools into one proved to be more challenging. We don't have buildings that are state of the art, but we have a lot of space. It has become clear to us. So happy to do more work with it.
Great, thank you. Court, did I see your hand? Do you still have a question,
Yes,
comment?
please.
Yeah, please.
Just a housekeeping note, back to the middle school financing Q&A. Because of the amount of data we're getting, if these documents could, 1, be dated, and 2, indicate the authors in the future, that'd be useful, just to track everything that's coming our way, please.
Great suggestions, Court. I will ask for that. Thank you. Charlie, I see a hand.
Yes, I just wanted to clarify one thing. I think that there were some comments about the fact that the 555 is still the number and that we're still tracking to 100 million for the project. That being the case, and that somehow, you know, we've already got escalation factored into the 555 to the best of our ability. The 108 then is, I guess we ought to clarify what that is, what the additional 8 million is. Because if it doesn't include escalation, what's in there? I guess my view on this is that we ought to look to you know, essentially fund or deliver any additional spaces that we need beyond the existing scope by making adjustments in the base you know, space plan, which means moving some out of the instructional category and allocating that to the gym and to the auditorium. I guess, you know, the question is what's in the 8 million, or what's the intent of that at this point, given that we seem to have escalation already covered?
I just want to clarify. I don't think we ever, at least my understanding of the 108 wasn't so much to say that it could be 108 because of escalation. I think what we were saying was back at town meeting, there was a number put out there, a really loose number, right? No one had studied this. No one had an ed plan. No one had a space template, right? It was a ballpark figure in saying that the cost of the project, whatever it ends up being, could rise because of escalation per year, to set some parameters, to set a budget. We've been moving along without a budget. There's no budget. There was never a vote until April 15th, 2021, to say we are dedicated to be, and in this case, we voted an NTE, and not to exceed, of 108, recognizing that there were some parameters at town meeting saying it could go up, that it could go up because cost of construction goes up. It could go up because the building might be bigger based on the ed plan. These are all questions no one had the answer at that time. So just recognizing that 2 years ago, there was, you know, a loose cost put out there and saying that the cost could go up because no one knows, right? So I think the 108, in my understanding of it, was to say, okay, we recognize that to get the ed plan right-sized building puts us in and about 100. We'll use loose numbers. We've heard the community feedback and we want to be responsive because that's our charge, whether it's to say, nope, we're at 100, or yes, we hear you, community, you want more. What is that more? That's what we're here to study and discuss. So that's my understanding. So that really just set a boundary, a parameter, and then let's right size these community spaces to keep us hopefully well within that, if not significantly under. So I don't know if that allows us to move on to the next agenda item as far as discussing the gym and auditorium, or if others still have questions regarding this. Yes, Court.
Yeah, I think I'm obligated to speak in regard to what I think I heard from the school committee on Tuesday, and I ask Dawn that you afford Heather that same opportunity if she wishes. The way I characterized the 108 on Tuesday was that I was confused. Some others agreed, some didn't. My confusion originated from my first understanding that the cost increase was indeed required for escalation. Looking at the FAQ, for example, as a source for that. Subsequent to that, the conversation went to gym and auditorium, two constituencies that were not satisfied with our space summary. So to me, the 108 is something that is debatable in terms of the degree to which it's escalation, the degree to which it is a size change incentive for us. The small majority of this small school committee, 3 out of 5 members, did express that reconsidering the space summary should not be out of bounds and should be, in fact, factored into our continuing conversations. That's the central point, I think, that I got out of Tuesday night. Heather, can you add perspective?
Yes, sorry, I wouldn't unmute. Yes, I would agree with what you say about a small majority looking to continue to review the space summary. I think in terms of as I think Cynthia put it, let's make sure we're sharpening the pencil. Other people have said that also. I would also say, I guess in terms of going backwards on your comments on the confusion piece, I also expressed that I didn't feel like there was confusion coming away with this. I actually, ironically enough, felt like we came away from our last meeting on the 15th with the most clarity that we've had in a while. I felt like the 108 is a cap and it gives us the space that we need to now figure out what our space summary looks like and what we're asking for. I'm not tied up in what the escalation numbers were and exactly how it got to 108, because I don't see 108 as a budget that we're targeting or shooting for. In fact, I very much hope that we come in below that. So I saw 108 as kind of a guideline, a very upper limit that gave us buffer to figure out what we're doing. And we had this discussion a little bit at the school committee also. So I think that the combination of that is that at a high level, yes, the school committee would like us to continue to look at in detail what is in this space summary and what should be there. And I think we're all in agreement that that's what we need to do now. And the biggest questions are the gym and auditorium. And I feel like debating the 108 isn't really a useful exercise, because what we need to debate is what should be in this space summary. And hopefully it'll be less than that. But so hopefully that provides context. And I think that does summarize the school committee feedback pretty well.
Thank you, both Court and Heather, for that. And Pat and Lori and I were there, so that was a good conversation, and appreciate that group having us at the table to have those conversations with them. Anyone else on this topic before we move to Jim? Sorry, I muted myself in the middle of talking. Anyone else before I move on to the gym and auditorium piece of the conversation that piggybacks nicely on this topic? Okay, great. I'm going to turn it over to Kristen, I believe. Right, Kristen? Where are you? Yes, you're nodding. Excellent. Kristen's like, for once, I didn't have to talk for an hour and a half.
So
it's all yours. I think you have a short visual, if I'm not mistaken, as far as walking through a few different scenarios on what the gym and auditorium could look like. And some of this we've seen before. I think there may be a little bit of new information, but I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, and so our goal is still to start schematic design on May 10th. That's just around the corner. And in order to do that, we really do need to dial in on the gym and the auditorium scope. So a lot of this information has been sent around in the past. We did some more refinements, but you know, at the last meeting, the committee did the work to set that new budget limit and say work toward combination D, for example. But at this point, my goal is to show you some of those options within that parameter, and then also to then arrive at our next meeting, which we'd like to have on May 6th again, so that we can start schematic design on May 10th and not have you vote here on the spot. We want to give you the information today, come back a week from now and vote on the seating and the sizing of the gym. And then we can start schematic design and start to answer some more of those cost questions down the road. So. Let me share. All right. So our goals updated to show the 108 not to exceed million project cost limit. Starting with the community request gymnasium options, we had originally some time ago a letter from CCYB that said full size cross courts for the gymnasium, and that's how we arrived at this one MIAA main court and then 2 full-size MIAA cross courts. So these would be full-size MIAA cross courts. That was that's the largest gym option that we've ever explored, and we have an estimate of 13,400 net square feet for that one. Then CCYB, you know, when we requested additional information, they did follow up with their slides and noted that they're looking for cross courts that are 74 by 46. And so that bullet at the time, you know, gave us the 74 by 46. And then we made some assumptions on the runouts beyond the goal line and on the sides that are noted here. So that's one MIA main court still, but then those larger cross courts actually drive a lot of the space of that gym. So that's where we were coming in at the 10,620 net square feet. So our most recent information from the community input side of the gymnasium is that this would be the right approach. I heard from Heather at the beginning in correspondence that we have more specifications around what that might be, because we do need to work with CCYB on our runout assumptions and the edges and the perimeter and the seating, but that all comes in schematic design. For now, though, based on this information, we believe the community request is really rooted in this 10,620 square foot version. Then quickly segue to the auditorium. We had been carrying that 2 grade plus staff size of 550. I've noted a few times that we don't see an educational program used for that, or I really, you know, and Lori and Justin can maybe piggyback on this, but we've never gotten feedback that 2 grade levels would assemble plus staff. So that 555 really kind of required some revisiting in our minds. And you'll see this with option 3. The other auditorium that we've been looking at is that 350 seats. So with that, we would be taking our base program of 270 seats and adding 80 to maintain that current Sanborn auditorium size. So that's the 350 that you've been seeing. Now, again, understanding that there may be something in the middle, or maybe the 550 wasn't right, we did go back and look at, if not 350, because that's 1 grade level plus, but it's not quite 2, and it's kind of some middle ground, it's what's existing. We went back and looked at the MSBA standard for high schools, for example. And if you use the MSBA standard for a high school, they develop their seating capacity based on 2/3 of the design enrollment. And so that would be an equivalent of 467 seats at Concord Middle School's enrollment of 700. So that, I think, if the school building committee or the school were to weigh in on the 350 status quo not being quite what they're looking for, the community or the school, then this is really what we think has the next most strongest legs in lieu of the 550. So these are the ranges that we had and the combinations that we had been looking at in our last meeting, where the 108 was developed and working toward combination D. Again, we in that meeting and now still do not feel that CCYB, and I know Mark's on the call and I hope maybe there's a time for him to speak in public comment, but the 2 MIA we just haven't heard is really the request for the cross courts. And so we feel that, you know, a combination around the 74 by 46 is really what's merited most. And then again, the 550 not being something that we would really recommend from a programmatic standpoint, we've updated these combinations to show what those options might be if you did the current CCYB request. That's that 10,600 approximately net square foot gym in both cases, and then one scenario with 350 seats and one scenario with 467. We've been discussing that we have a range that we should be operating under or reviewing. One is if you just take the net square feet and add it to the gross. One is if you actually use a grossing multiplier on the net, because we think that will fall somewhere in that range between the low and the high of using the net. We're going to need some additional circulation space, some additional wall space, storage, and so on. So we do believe there's a net to gross factor, but it's not quite that 1.5. So we believe we'll fall somewhere in that range here. So then just to explain this table, because I know that people have also had questions about the impervious area. Currently, the scheme that we've been showing, the concept that everybody's been looking at for the base program has a footprint, including the walkway, because even though that's not on the ground, it's impervious. The building footprint is 81,850. Then we've taken the roads and drives and walks as they've been presented on our site plans, and that is our baseline. So in each of these cases, we've taken that additional square footage and just added it to our baseline of the building, because this would be ground floor square footage, right? This is first floor square footage. Now, during schematic design, we may be shifting some things around, but this we believe would be your worst case, because the current scheme plus the net or gross would arrive here. Again, maintaining the roads, drives, and walks is the same across the board. All of these come within the 15% impervious limit. And these are our updated ranges, where we believe at the end of the day, at the end of schematic, those additional spaces would be somewhere in the 3.2 to 4.8 for the smaller combination, or 4.2 to 6.2 million additional cost for the larger combination. And then I did want to clarify that, again, our estimates to date have been based on that 348 building square foot, the site costs that we know, and all of those presentations we had several weeks and meetings ago. It is based on the 559 per square foot, and that gets us to just under 100 million. And then the additional scope, though, we did apply just the 555 target construction square foot, assuming again some efficiencies, because these are net adds to spaces that we already have in the design. So I'm going to stop sharing and can definitely pull this right back up, but these are within your 108. These are within your 15%. And again, our goal for the next meeting would be to vote on if you feel that this is the right gym response for the community, and then what the right seating response would be for the auditorium for the community. And of course, we're open to hear if there's any other factors that we haven't been made aware of.
Great, thank you, Kristen. I'm going to look for any questions, comments. Justin Cameron, I see your hand.
Thank you. So I
Hi.
just wanted to clarify for the committee. There's been two numbers that have been bantered around as far as the current occupancy permit for the Sanborn Auditorium. And it is a little bit confusing. There are, I believe, around 370 fixed seats or bolted seats in the Sanborn Auditorium. However, the occupancy permit that is given to us by the fire department in town of Concord is for 420. We often bring in, about 100 folding chairs and place them out to try to get 2 grades in there for lots of assemblies that we do, part of like our anti-bullying curriculum and our advisory program. Whenever we do our very important musical tradition, we always bring those folding chairs in as well. Again, 420 doesn't allow us to run band concerts out of the Sanborn Auditorium. But I just want to make sure that this committee has an understanding that 467 is now a little above what we currently have. But just a moment of clarity, if folks thought, the number was 370 and we were doing just fine with 370, in actuality, that is not the number. 420 is the number.
Thank you for that, Justin. Where do you put the chairs? Curiosity. Is it on the stage?
Nope. So before the stage, because the stage is actually able to be extended. And a lot of our programs, especially our assemblies, where I might bring in like a motivational speaker and a speaker on diversity, a speaker, anything that a shared message to the culture and community of our students and our staff is really important. They're just center stage and there's no reason to extend that stage. So there is such an area for stage extensions that I would say 70 out of the 90 chairs, folding chairs we put out are right there in front. Then we have some room in the back as well.
I didn't realize that. Good to know. Okay, great. Thank you for that clarity. Anyone else? Heather?
Can I just ask I know there are hands, but I just wanted to ask a clarification question on what Justin just said. So right now we can add folding chairs. It means it increases the capacity. I'm assuming that in a new auditorium, we will not be designed that way, or we will. I guess I just want to know, now if we're looking at the number of 350 or 467, is that really our number of what fits and what we're permitted for? Or, are we looking at that same flexibility in a new one or no? I'm assuming not, but.
I can say that flexibility is a conversation for schematic design and how we do the seating and everything, but the capacity, whether it's folding chair or fixed, that's the determination. So
okay, so the numbers we're looking at are already capacity, not just seats.
It's seated capacity.
Seated capacity. Okay, so I just wanted to clarify so that we're not looking at this thinking, if we choose the 350, we can still fit, over 400 or something. If we choose 350, we're talking 350 capacity, that's it. Thank you. Just wanted to clarify.
Thank you. Frank, I saw your hand and then I see a few in the participant list, so I promise I'll get to everyone.
I have a question on parking. If we expand this thing, we don't have parking for the cars. So we go out and extend, but we don't have the 15% out there to do it, do we?
So right now, it's not even just the 15% that's a constraint on parking, but just the site area. Right now, the fields and the building really fill with the circulation and everything. It's a very tight fit. So of course, during schematic design, we're going to work on refinements, and that parking number of 134 that we've currently estimated could change a little bit, as we really get into the details. But that's the assumption we should work under.
But if you have the capacity, put all these people, you got to have the capacity for the cars. So it means you're going to blow the parking lot out.
Yeah, so the parking areas are never designed for one car per seat or anything like that, or for the max capacity of limited number of events. So maybe Justin and Laura, you want to speak to, you have this capacity of 420 I'm hearing now, and only 70 spaces on the site. So now you'd be doubling your number of spaces with maintaining the same seats.
I'm not sure if this is going to answer the question, but just a reminder, we're bringing 2 buildings into one, 2 staffs into one building. And when we run a program at a Sanborn with just the 70 spaces, we're running a program for all 3 grades for both buildings. So anybody drives by the Sanborn facility during a time when we're running the musical, it's awful. Parking is everywhere. But the parking lot of the new building is already increased because we're bringing all the 6th grade staff over and the supplemental staff of, the building custodians and all of that in the Peabody building as well. Not sure if that answers the question or not.
I had one thought, Kristen, that I was going to suggest, might as well say it out loud now, maybe do a little, some parking review here, because I think you'd be able to use bus lanes and things like that, that maybe we haven't factored in yet, and really see what the capacity will be with the hard top we have. And then Justin and I can talk more on the overflow on those big nights. It is a concern. I don't know what the solution is, but it is a concern, and, get a feel for what those times would be like if we're going to have a lot of people there.
And that speaks to the, sorry, Kristen, that speaks to the community piece of the capacity. Justin was speaking to the educational piece where he's pulling multiple grades in for enrichment or some type of school program, right? So I'd assume those kids are either taking the bus or getting dropped off, and that's a non-issue during the day. It's the evening performances or weekends that we're discussing.
Yeah, parking's only an issue when there's a lot of adults coming in.
Right. Okay. Court, I see your hand up. I will get to you. I just want to, Matt's been patient with his hand up in the participant list. So let me do Matt and then Court. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm a little confused in that I thought I just read in the minutes that we reviewed this morning that the school did not have any 2-grade events, and that, that was part of the earlier discussion of the auditorium. And I wonder now, based upon Justin's comments, does the ed plan need to be revised to reflect this requirement? Because I didn't see that coming before. And then the other is that, as we look at these incremental spaces, whether it's the auditorium or the basketball court, I think we need to be mindful about utilization and whether we're talking about corner cut cases, so to speak. And so it's hard because there's not really been a plan behind this that, like to evaluate the auditorium. If it costs $2 million more to, expand the auditorium and we're adding, let's say 80 seats for that, then, and those seats are occupied 5 times a year, then over the 50-year, future of the building, each time that seats occupied is costing $100. If we add 1.5 million to get run out on the side of the 3-point line so that kids can shoot a corner 3-pointer, and let's say there are 100 of those per year, that's $300 per 3-pointer for over the 50-year life of the building. So, is that what we're trying to do?
Could I answer the first question? And Matt, you've actually really named some of why you feel like things are moving around with the auditorium. When we first met with SMMA and we're trying to give them the best guidance possible and consider fiscal, fiscal responsibility and the amount of usage, we did agree to 1 grade at a time being at least the minimum educational plan. Last time we met, Justin and I were asked to go back to the staff and do our own work and come back with more detailed information on the usage and wishes of the educators. We did go back and actually count, and that's what Justin just shared out. We also, to your point of like how do you juggle the balance of how much usage you have for certain needs? So our educators are saying they'd love an auditorium for 600 because that would mean they never have to use the high school. The musical maybe runs 2 nights instead of 4. But to your point, that how many nights a year is that? So we're kind of struggling with everything you just really articulately named. Would we use something bigger? Yes. How often? We could give you the list of concerts in the musical. If it's mid-ground, like you know, the middle option C there, it would meet some of those needs. If it stays the way it is, it meets fewer of those needs. So we're happy to outline that in more detail, but that's exactly what we've been trying.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to have an auditorium large enough to hold town meeting, but
Yes,
I don't
I
want
know, I
taxpayers to
know.
have to pay for it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Where was I? Court? Sorry, did that answer all of your questions, Matt? Or I don't want to move on without. Okay. Court, you had
Yeah, just
visibly
very,
raised a hand. Do you
very,
still have?
very briefly, and trying to represent individual members of the school committee who aren't here today. One, as recently as this week, did echo what I'm hearing here, and that is that we need a, quote, more organized assessment of the parking situation, unquote. So I just want to put that emphasis in. I include myself among the people who listened with great consternation when we heard a community member say parking along Old Marlborough Road is a perfectly suitable solution. I don't think that would stand well with public safety, but the original point, a more thorough assessment, it's time for that. And then secondly, I think it's germane to this entire discussion of further building expansion and impermeable surfaces. We heard the last time we met that the outdoor spaces would be a matter that we'd take up in the future. The comment that was made by, again, a member of our school committee was more detail on the spaces, including restoration, if necessary, of the cross-country course, quote unquote, is among the considerations that we might take up earlier, not later, in light of the fact that we're already focusing on community constituencies that were not satisfied with the current space summary, notably basketball and the auditorium use. And the note here is there's another constituency, and that is the many, many, many people and groups who use the outdoor spaces. And the concern that I have, I think this school committee member does as well, that pushing that to much later in the process might squeeze it and thereby not accurately represent the interests of yet another constituency, the outdoor users of this property. Thank you.
And just for the record, when that comment was made, and Kristen, I think I represented myself as a committee member, but also as someone who knows the process, that typically those decisions get made in schematic design, which is exactly the place that we're moving into. I've never fully designed a site under feasibility. So those are the definitely next steps. And in the next few months, we'll see a lot of that and have more discussion about it, was how I answered the question. That's definitely in the schematic design scope.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting it be taken up elsewhere. I am suggesting, however, that decisions now on sizing on a property that is limited in its space will have implications then for the non-building design and usage by the community.
Appreciate that, Court. Charlie, I see a hand.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, when are we going to be in a position or able to have a more detailed discussion on the gym and auditorium from a design point of view? I hate to wait until schematic to make some of the decisions that probably ought to be made now or before we vote, for example, on the gym sizing. I'm aware, and I think we're all aware of the fact that the gym has escalated from the original 6,000 square feet that was in Lori's original plan to 7,000. We went to option one, which was considered briefly, or it has been in the consideration since last March, which was 8,600. And now we're somehow at 10,600. Now, if you look at the details of this, you can see ways to save significant amounts of money by making minor changes. I know CCYB wants larger cross courts, but the de facto standard, for example, for cross courts for junior high or for full courts for junior high is 42 by 74. CCYB wants 46 by 74. Now, I just say this by way of example. That change, and in addition to the adding space to the distance between the edge of the court and the curtain, adds $2 million to the cost of that of the gym. So I think, you know, what's going on here is we've incremented one step at a time all the way up to something that is, you know, really got what I would call chocolate on the ice cream of the cone. We're gilding the lily, as it were. We're potentially, you know, doing more than what one needs to do to satisfy the community. Now that may be up for debate, but if you look at court sizes for junior high, they are 42 by 74. And if you want to verify that, go to Google and look at cross courts for junior high, and you'll find 6 or 7 or 8 references to that is the standard or the de facto standard for junior high cross courts and junior high courts. So, you know, I just raise this because there is significant amounts of cost embedded in these what I would call nuances around how we do these two spaces. Now, if we want to tuck the gym cost, incremental cost into the existing space and make trade-offs, the bigger you make it, the harder that is to do. So I would urge that we do spend a little bit more time before we get to a point where we're voting on this to clean up these options, because I think there's some other ways of looking at some of these spaces.
Okay, Charlie, thank you for that. I'm just going to, I recognize that Mark Caruso has his hand up, but he's not a committee member. So I'm going to ask him to hold his comments for public comment. We're not voting on anything regarding this today, so we're happy to hear what he has to say, hopefully soon. I do want to point out that his communication that Heather referenced earlier spoke a little bit to this, so I'm happy to read the quick blurb that relates to that, just for the committee and the broader audience's information. So he said, while there's a general range of widths, 42 to 50 for regulation in quotes, middle school court size, the 42 width Charlie mentioned, and he was talking about the previous meeting, is inadequate because it only leaves 1 foot of space between the 3-point line and the sideline. So if you imagine where those come together at the corner, I think that's what he's talking about, making it nearly impossible to effectively use the corner of the court. Speaking for both the CCYB and Concord Middle School basketball programs, the 50-foot wide would be ideal, but the compromise of a 46 width splits the difference and allows an acceptable 3 feet of space between where the 3-point line and the corner, the 3 feet of space in each corner. That was our rationale for using that number in our recommendation, and the most modern middle school gyms will have at least this width. So without the ability to call on Mark, since he's not a community member, I just wanted to share his comments that we received after our last meeting. But we can certainly study this. I'm cognizant that with the hope of starting schematic design shortly, that, you know, flushing some of this out may get pushed into schematic design. I'm looking at Kristen as that's kind of a question. I don't know if you'll have time ahead of preparing to have the committee, you know, recommend what we move into schematic design with. I don't know that you'll have time to turn around any study of that sort before then, but maybe a promise that we will look at it closer. I guess I don't have that answer.
I think that getting into that level of detail is schematic design.
I'm fully aware of the 3-point issue, and I think Matt Johnson referenced it as well. I'm just saying that you know, there are significant costs in these things that we would all like to have. We'd like to have the full 50, but the plain fact of the matter is that 42 is fine for the vast majority of schools. And I do dispute the notion that quote modern or whatever schools have, 46 or 50. They don't. And there are many examples that are not at that size. So, you're talking about lots of money here. $2 million so people can have an extra 2 feet at the 3-point edge of the corner of the basketball court. So, let's be cognizant that what sharpening pencils means is saving significant amounts of money that hit the tax base. So that's all I'm getting at here, is that we need to be careful, because once this gets rolling, you're going to be in a position where you can't roll this back, and where it's going to just plain happen, and it's baked into the bottom line of the project. So I for one think that what we want to do are things that are adequate, not things that are score 10 on the score of goodness or perfectness. We want to do what is adequate and what meets the needs, not what is beyond that. So that's my bias. I'm sorry to be
No, that's okay. I appreciate you
put a
sharing,
poll
Charlie.
poll on the program here, but yeah, I mean, this is, you look at the auditorium as well. We were initially happy with the cafetorium, and we went from a cafetorium to a auditorium of 270 seats, because we felt, well, geez, we at least have a single grade auditorium. Now we're talking about, well, it's really 350, but no, it's really 350 plus all the folding chairs, so it's up in the 400s. So I mean, you see where this goes, and it concerns me that given the escalation risks that have already been discussed, that we're being a little bit loose. It just comes across that way to me, a little bit loose with the money here. And I think we ought to tighten it up and get on board around, shrinking down this requirement.
I just want to be clear. I'm getting, sorry. I just want to be clear. I don't think anyone's saying that that's what has to be done. I think we're saying we want to study it. So I don't think we're being loose. I think we're looking at the options and trying to decide what the right size is. So I don't think that decision's been made yet, Charlie. So, but I appreciate you bringing it up, and I'm not reading Mark's letter because I dispute what you're saying in any way. I'm just sharing that because short of allowing him to participate in our conversation, because this is a committee discussion. So, but that was feedback we heard from him related to that. Okay, in the interest of time, we're at 9:29. I see Pat Nelson has her hand up. I see 2 community members that have their hands up. I'm going to ask them to hold, because hopefully we're getting to public comment here quite soon. Pat?
Thank you, Don. Well, just because I like to have facts, is that order of magnitude seems big to me, the 2 million, and I just wondered if, from Kristen's point of view, that's a reasonable number for making that change that Charlie just discussed. I know, and I don't want to put you on the spot if it takes more.
Well, it goes from
My
80.
screen's
My estimate, by the way, was 8,800 square feet, but the estimate is I think 10,600. So they turn out differently. Now you have to look at it, and I had asked that it be looked at. Well, I guess maybe it wasn't looked at, but I think now is the time to do it. It doesn't take a lot of effort to put this out on a piece of graph paper and calculate the square footage. But I think we need to do what we can before we vote. It's all I'm saying. Do what we can before we vote. Is it what, next week or a couple of weeks? On this.
Yeah, I think she was looking for a vote next week to be able to then the following week start SD based on.
So I don't think we need to put anybody on the spot right now, but the difference between 8,800 and 10,600 is close to 2 million.
Okay, Kristen, do you have time to look at the difference between the 76 and the 72 and put an order of magnitude on that in short order so that folks can have it prior to any vote next week? Okay, thank you.
I will give you more detail if you need it on what my calculation showed and what my dimensions were.
Well, I think it's the difference between 72 and 76, if I'm not mistaken, Charlie, plus the runoffs, right?
42 and 42.
Yeah, it's some sideline
42,
stuff. Yeah.
I'm sorry. 42 feet wide versus 46 feet wide is.
Plus some of the run out stuff. Yeah, it's not a big
the
deal.
run out.
Right. Since I asked the question, I think we can move on from that. I just want to say, I feel like there's an elephant in the room right now. And I don't know how we tackle this, but I've heard people make comments about looking at the original approved space summary and taking space from that in order to accommodate additional gym and auditorium space. And to my mind, that's been kind of sacrosanct. It was, decided by the design committee, subcommittee, voted on by the school committee. I just think we need to clarify, are we even really thinking about that? Because that raises us to a whole nother level of conversation to me. And I don't, I'm wondering what other members of the committee are thinking about that.
Pat, I'm happy to hear what the other members are thinking. I think earlier said Justin and I were certainly willing to do that and meet with SMMA before next week and see if we can bring anything. I think you've heard the reasons why that plan is what it is. We're willing to look.
So I appreciate your willingness to look. I think we should remember that this has been, a bedrock of this committee's planning for a very long time. And I personally feel very strongly about that, but I definitely appreciate your willingness to look. Thank you.
Well, I think Court mentioned it for one. You want to talk about the elephant in the room? I think Court mentioned it for one in terms of school committee. And I certainly think the finance committee mentioned it as something that should be attempted in terms of doing what we can to accommodate the requirement, in the existing space plan. So that's why I brought it up, or why I commented on it. And I, quite frankly, think that is the right thing to do. But yeah, it's not just us, it's coming from other committees. Am I correct in saying that, or am I kind of off base?
The finance committee did ask. That was the second paragraph, and that was when I offered that question up to Lori for consideration. So yes, and then I did hear Court say, and I don't remember who asked that question, Court,
And then
but
Court,
it's irrelevant if it came up that it.
Court, you might want to comment as well. I mean, let's make sure we're all on the same page here.
I will try to express this my way, and that is that my sense as a member of the design subcommittee, part of the group that brought the space summary to this full committee and that got the endorsement of this full committee, was a space summary that we thought was going to be intact and be carried forward at that time. That's what I thought. When we then subsequently reopened certain parts of the space summary, my sense, and several other members share this with me, is that obligates us, if we're going to be truly responsible about this, to say, how do we tackle those specific items that certain people, certain constituencies want to be reopened without taking a look at the space summary in its entirety? Or in short, let me put it this way, why would we deny ourselves the opportunity to solve specific quote unquote problems in a tiny context called gym and auditorium, when there might be better solutions had if we were to look at this project in its entirety? Why would we conceivably deny ourselves that opportunity? I don't understand why we would do so. So I appreciate you calling it out, Pat. I don't think it's an elephant. I think it's been in the room with us the entire time. What I hear you saying is, let's, if it in fact is lurking in the room, let's bring it out even more visibly and try to deal with it, because these are tough solutions. I go back to what Lori said at the beginning of the meeting. This collaboration stuff is difficult with a project of this remarkable magnitude. And we're at this squeeze point for time. We're at this squeeze point for money. We're at this squeeze point for design. So by rights, it should be difficult right now. And I'm okay with the difficulty. Now we look to the process by which we come to some reconciliation on how to balance needs.
Matt, Root, I see your hand, and then Heather, I see yours just popped up.
Yeah, Cord, I appreciate your comments there. I think you said it well. I guess I just feel like it's incumbent on us as part of the due diligence we've heard from the community that they want the bigger spaces. We've also heard loud and clear that we should be keeping the costs down. And so now we need to go back and look at what's driving that cost. I mean, getting back to our initial discussion, it's less about the cost escalation. It's the size of the project, and I'm not advocating one way or the other, but I think that it's our responsibility to go back and look at it so that we can give a clear answer to the town of, okay, if we go with the bigger gym and the bigger auditorium, then to stay within the budget, we need to make some cuts over here on education. And is that really what we want to do?
You know, and it relates back to, sorry for not raising my hand, but it relates back to the extent to which we expand these needs around the gym and the auditorium. It makes it harder to accommodate, those requirements within, an alternative, $100 million limit. And I don't take that $100 million to be sort of, I didn't take that lightly. That's been our target, and that's been a guardrail. It's been the outside number for, I don't know, how long have we been here? For, seems a year and a half, we've been talking about 100 million. Now that escalation is off the table as a rationale to go to 108, and I believe that was, I don't believe we're going to 108 for escalation reasons. I think that's been removed from the table. We ought to look at ways to be as conservative as we can while meeting the needs of the community and trying to do so within that 100 million. And again, echoing the comments of several others, it's our due diligence, it's our fiduciary responsibility to try to sort that out in the 100 million. And if we can't, we can't, but certainly it's our requirement to determine what we can do. And if we can't, why we can't. Again, I think there's a lot of flexibility in that instructional budget to play with. And I think we've got to look at it. And I applaud Court for, that decision at the school board to open that up. So, or to at least consider it. So that's just my take on this.
Thank you, Charlie. Was it a decision of the school committee?
No, let me.
There was no.
I'm sorry, it was a motion.
It wasn't a motion, I don't believe.
No, in fact, and Heather can certainly confirm this. We made no effort to try to get school committee consensus or school committee decision. We didn't think that was our prerogative, still don't. Instead, we wanted to collect opinions to inform us before we came to this meeting. That's the way it was framed. I think that's what happened. So you're correct. Minor correction in Charlie's statement, not a decision by any means.
Okay, that's fine. It's fine for me either way.
Thank you.
And I think it was fair to say, you spoke for the 3 members who felt that way. We also heard to the contrary that there was support for a little bit of a larger building to meet the community needs. So I just want to be fair to.
Yes, and I'll go further and say one member was quite explicit. Let's not be penny wise and pound foolish, I think was the expression.
Great. Thank you for that, Court. Heather.
Thank you. I appreciate you mentioning that, Court. That was one of the things I was going to mention. I first want to agree that I do think we should be looking at the big picture here. So I'm not disagreeing here, and I really appreciate that Lori and Justin are going to take a look at this again. It is a big picture question. That said, I also want to make sure that we are giving them the guidance and the direction that they need to go do this. I have a little concern, and I'll put it right out there with the word adequate. In terms of Lori and Justin looking at the space needed to fulfill the educational plan, we don't tend to consider ourselves a community that educates in just an adequate way. And I don't want Lori and Justin to walk away from here feeling that they need to cut this down to a point that's just adequate. I think the community, we will definitely hear from the community if we do that. And this community expects a level of education that is more than just adequate. They expect a stellar education. And I think we need to make sure as we look at the rest of the space summary that we are still protecting that and that we are not cutting away from what is core to our community belief here. So I just want to make sure that that's out here. I was also going to mention what I guess you would call the minority opinion on the school committee, which was a couple of us. One member was, like Court said, very clear in this, and I would echo it, that this is our chance to build the building that this community needs and that this community expects in terms of education. And I agree with her that to be penny wise and pound foolish is not a good idea. So anyway, I won't get into debate now, but I just want that opinion to be heard also, because that was also a strong opinion from the school committee. And again, I don't want us sending Lori and Justin away with the idea that we're trying to cut down the educational goals here to adequate, because I think that is not what we're here to do.
Thank you for that reminder, Heather, because at the end of the day, this is a middle school and that's what we're tasked with studying. So yeah, I often have to remind my clients when, this is a school, this is about the education. So thank you for bringing that back around. Pat, your hand's back up.
Yeah, I just want to second Heather. And I just want to also say, yes, I think escalation, discussion, debate, argument is off the table. Where I keep kind of landing back at is the number greater than 100 million was discussed at the 2019 town meeting, all the way up to 108 million. Regardless of what drove that number, when people voted for the feasibility study, they heard that this building could cost up to 108 million. Now, I do not want this building to cost 108 million, but I just, the only broad consensus of the community that we have is the vote that was taken for the feasibility study. So I'm putting that forward and hands shot right up. So I'm gonna turn myself off.
I am going to call on Matt Johnson and then any other committee members. And then I do want to get through next steps to open it up to public comment because it's 9:45. I have a hard stop at 10, sorry. I had hoped we'd be through this by 9:30, but Matt Johnson.
I just needed to respond to that thing about that the 2019 town meeting voted for a project that could be up to 108 million. I think that the whole earlier part of this discussion was essentially to refute that speculative, multiple escalations off the 90 million project, and that 2 years of escalation was built into that number. You could apply 1 year of escalation on top of that 90 million, that would get you to 100, but not to 108. And even so, we are now with new numbers that, tell us where we really are now. And so it really shouldn't factor in, this number. If we're talking about going to 108, it's about getting to a bigger scope than we originally anticipated. And I would absolutely agree with Heather that, if in Concord, we want it to be a 10 out of 10 when it comes to the educational program. When it comes to other needs, traditionally in Concord, we've found other ways to fund them. And this, using the school budget to fund it, for capital needs, is a point off the curve. And we can decide to do that, but we are setting a new precedent if we do so.
Any other committee? Thank you, Matt. Any other committee member questions, comments? Sounds like we're going to see a little bit more on the
Well,
gymnasium from Kristen. Yep, Charlie.
I want to clarify this use of the word adequate. I think I may have been the one that used that word. I use that word to basically talk to the notion that what we want to do is meet the requirements. I don't think we need to exceed them in a significant way. And I think we want to meet them. We want to meet them in an excellent way. And that means doing things smartly, and in some cases trying to do things conservatively. But if we meet the needs, we meet the needs. And right now we have exceeded the needs, and what I would see the needs in certain areas. And I think we have a very robust building where we can possibly afford to make some changes and to make some trade-offs. And I think that's still a possibility in order to do something that does meet the needs while staying within the 100 million. And I think that pretty much could be demonstrated rather quickly.
I'd go further and say we could probably get an excellent, innovative, and award-winning building for 650 students for $100 million.
And if you take it a step further, again, you compare to other communities, the $100 million building that we have on the table right now is exceptional in its size and scope, and all of the spaces, and we've reviewed them in depth, all of the spaces are outstanding and are well beyond what I would call leading edge. So keep that in mind. We're 25%, 24% above what everybody is targeted to do by MSBA. So keep that in mind. If we were just 15%, we would save 10% of our space. So let's just leave it there on the comparison issue.
Sorry, Charlie. I think Lori spoke to some of the reasons why on that earlier. So everyone's got that info and we've heard that. So, and just for clarity, Matt, the planned enrollment is 700, not 650. So I don't want any confusion around that. So I think your statement was that
the capacity is 700, planned enrollment 650, right?
What's that?
Capacity will be 700, planned enrollment 650 with some headroom.
I mean, I guess I don't remember what current enrollment is.
Actuals right now, Dawn, would be 650. So I can agree with
design
that.
enrollment, which is typically how the MSBA refers to it, the design enrollment, which is basically what you're planning for, recognizing that typically if you build it, they will come.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. So Peter Fishalis, I'm trying to get us to public comment. I'm sorry, guys. I'm so thankful for all the comments. And again, I have a hard stop at 10 for a meeting, and I'm sorry for that.
It'll be very quick.
Okay.
I too want to be very fiscally prudent on this project, but I also want to state that we heard a large community input that said what we had originally designed was not acceptable, was not adequate in terms of the auditorium and the gym. So I want to just make sure that we don't lose sight that we did get a lot of pushback from the community saying that original plan was not what they wanted to see. I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Thank you, Peter. Okay, I think next steps is that something, Kristen, you can speak to in short order? I want to get us to public comment for sure.
Yeah, I think the next steps again were to plan on what that scope is beyond the ed plan scope that was already voted in March, and then at our next meeting next week, Thursday, and that would be so that we can start schematic design on May 10th. Of course, any shifts in that would result in changes to the schedule.
Okay, thank you. Any new business? Okay, public comments. I'm going to call in order that I saw them. Mark Caruso, then Johanna Boynton, and then Mary Hartman. So Mark, hi.
Hey, Don. Thanks, everybody. I'll make it quick as I can. Just to respond to the initial comment about the space, the driver for this is really the overall lack of space in town. It's not just about this particular gym. It's about the overall landscape of what we have to deal with and what the impact is to kids' schedules as a result of that lack of court space. If we had adequate gym space at the elementary schools, it wouldn't be an issue. So that's part of the reason. There are lots of decision points that go into looking at what size courts we need for what use cases, whether it's practices or games, simultaneous practices, simultaneous games. So I agree that there probably should be a more comprehensive discussion about this. And maybe we have a separate meeting where we can do a full presentation, maybe bring in somebody that actually builds basketball courts. All I know is that myself and the families that participate in the program, both the CMS basketball program and the CCYB basketball program, are in hundreds of gyms every season. And we see what's out there, we see what's being built, and we know what the requirement is there. So I think that we do need to have a presentation on what our goals are, what the trade-offs are. Maybe we bring in Aaron Jonkus, Coach Cohen to talk a little bit about it, maybe an outside gym provider. Second piece is both the revenue expense side need to be considered. So if we limit the space, it will limit rental income potential. And so if that is something that I heard the finance committee talk about it, what are the potentials for bringing in additional revenue? How we design the space will impact what we can get for rentals for it. So if rental income isn't going to be considered, then that's not a big deal. We don't have to factor that in, but we have to look at that matrix. And the space details will determine who will rent. And then the last piece is, I think getting to schematic design will provide a lot greater detail around what the real impact is of the incremental cost. And if we did need to peel it back, we could do that. If we find that it's going to be a significant increase and we have to make it 8,600 instead of 10,600, then that's something that we could do in schematic design. I just think that right now the numbers that are being presented are not that realistic. So.
Mark, I appreciate your feedback.
Oh, just one more quick thing.
Oh, sure.
Just to confirm what Kristen said at the beginning, that 10,600 square foot is the ideal for CMS and CCYB. And if anybody step foot, 2 foot with cross court or with court to try to take a 3-pointer, they will understand why 42 feet is not adequate. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark. Mrs. Boynton, hello, good morning.
Good morning, and I'll be super quick. 72 Chestnut Street, Joanna Boynton, and you all know me, and I've sat in your seats for many years as a school committee member on the high school building committee. And I just want to say thank you. I know this is an enormous endeavor, and it's very, very important. And I want to say just a couple things in reaction to the meeting. One is some people say that all voices, we're being loose with the money, or we're being loose with, this design or those sorts of things. I think you've actually been incredibly thoughtful and incredibly careful and incredibly well positioned to say you've listened really, really carefully. All those voices are really important. And the reason I sat and stayed on the call today was to be sure publicly that really still stands. It's, as you know, it's a lot to manage following all of this and how much time goes into it. I would only say this, that I support a lot of what Charlie said and Heather said and Mark said, and that if you go to schematic design, you have, I believe, the opportunity to then say, here's the parts that actually can be adjusted, taken out. I believe we did a lot of that in the high school project, the value engineering, to say, if we want to be at 100 million, here are the places now. And the programmatic things in the gym and the auditorium are not just add-ons. They're really, really important to the education. And I agree, adequate doesn't stand with the taxpayer. And I'd be very fearful if we go that route, that the taxpayers that come out for that town meeting vote, it might go to what happened with the master plan, because a lot of parents will come out. So just those few thoughts of gratitude really to everybody for all this work. And, I think we can do it in a schematic design to address a lot of the issues that's come up. Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate the comments. Mary Hartman, good morning again.
Hi, thanks for letting me speak again. First of all, thank you for all the work you do. I think this is a great discussion. I do want to challenge the assertion that the 108 was presented at the town meeting when we got this thing rolling with the 1.5 million. The number that was, I watched all the videos, I've looked at all of the presentations. The number that was spoken was 90 plus, with the caveat that could change. And the only time I saw a larger number was 105, which was on a slide that was in an addendum that was never presented to town meeting. So I want to be clear on what the expectation was when we got the original 1.5. Second thing I want to say is there's something came up at the select board meeting that I thought might be of interest to this committee. And there was a comment that the demographics of the town are shifting and there are more school children and less elderly people. And I asked Kari Tari to look into what is the change between 2010 and 2020 in K through 12. And in fact, we've seen a decrease in the number of school-age children consistently. I think 2 grades went up over that 10-year period, but in the time has actually the numbers have gone down. So I thought that might be of interest to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other? Mark Caruso, is your hand, is he still here? I still see his hand. Maybe it just didn't get taken down. Are there any other, thank you, Mark. Any other public comments that anyone would like to make today? Hearing none. I want to just express gratitude for everyone for the conversation today. I think, you know, this isn't an easy process, and I'm, as co-chair, appreciative of everyone's time and efforts and comments, and, you know, appreciation for being fiscally responsible, being educationally responsible, and community needs responsible, and sort of balancing all of those. I'm thinking back on Kristen's 3-legged stool in a different way that she's presented, but, you know, all of these things become important, and sort of balancing how we address them in a built environment will long-term affect all of the students in Concord for years and generations to come. So, you know, this is all really important, and these meetings have been long lately, and I appreciate everyone really, you know, being patient and sticking through it and sharing your thoughts and comments along the way. So I don't know, that's my 2 cents on just appreciation for everyone and for the time, and the public who's been following along and, you know, sits through the long meetings that we've been having. Thank you. So I think we may see some information coming from Kristen ahead of next week. That next week wasn't a meeting on our, that I'm aware of. That's a new proposition for that meeting, Kristen, is that correct? So assuming that's okay with most everyone, I'm not going to ask for a formal vote on that, but let's plan on meeting again next week at 7:30 a.m. and trying to talk about this further. Okay, so with that, I'd entertain any motions.
Move to adjourn.
Thank you, Court.
Second.
Thank you, Heather. Okay, Stephen, you still with us, Stephen?
He's not here. He had to leave.
No. Okay, Jared? Also had to leave?
Nope.
Matt
Yep.
Johnson? Oh, I see you, Jared. Hey, was that a yes?
Yes.
Matt Johnson?
Aye.
Lori?
Yes.
Justin?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Russ?
Yes.
Kate?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
Court?
Yes.
Heather?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Chris? Maybe Chris had to leave. I don't see him. Charlie? Matt Root?
Yes.
Yes. Sorry, I
Thank
just,
you. Nope, that's okay, Charlie. Charlie and Matt said yes. Pat? Yes, Pat?
Yes, yes, sorry.
Okay, and I'm a yes. So thank you, everyone. We'll see you next week, and we'll continue to discuss all of these issues.
Thank you
all
so
so
much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.